of Chapter 8, Kindergarten Dropout in Ramona the Pest. You may recall that after Ramona's terrible day at school, she had a huge tantrum and finally pretty much cried herself to sleep. Let's find out what happens the next morning. The next morning, Mrs. Quimby walked into the girls' room and said briskly to Ramona, "Which dress do you want to wear to school today?" The empty space in her mouth and the heel marks on the wall above her bed reminded Ramona of all that had happened the day before. "I'm not going to school," she said, and reached for her play clothes while Beezus put on a fresh school dress. A terrible day had begun. No one said much at breakfast. Howie, who had recovered from his cold, stopped for Ramona on his way to school and then went on without her. Ramona watched all the children in the neighborhood go to school, and when the street was quiet, she turned on the television. Her mother turned it off, saying, "Little girls who don't go to school can't watch television." Ramona felt that her mother did not understand. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to go to school more than anything in the world, but she could not go back when her teacher did not like her. Ramona got out her crayons and paper, which someone had put away for her, and settled down to draw. She drew a bird, a cat, and a ball in a row, and then with her red crayon she crossed out the cat because it did not begin with the same sound as bird and ball. Afterward, she covered a whole sheet of paper with cues, Ramona style, with ears and whiskers. Ramona's mother did not feel sorry for Ramona. She merely said, "Get your sweater, Ramona. I have to drive down to the shopping center." Ramona wished she had a dime from the tooth fairy to spend. There followed the most boring morning of Ramona's entire life. She trailed along after her mother in the shopping center while Mrs. Quimby bought socks for Beezus, some buttons and thread, pillowcases that were on sale, a new electric cord for the waffle iron, a package of paper for Ramona to draw on, and a pattern. Looking at patterns was the worst part. Ramona's mother seemed to sit for hours looking at pictures of boring dresses. At the beginning of the shopping trip, Mrs. Quimby said, "Ramona, you mustn't put your hands on things in stores." Later she said, "Ramona, please don't touch things." By the time they reached the pattern counter, she said, "Ramona, how many times do I have to tell you to keep your hands to yourself?" When Mrs. Quimby had finally selected a pattern and they were leaving the store, who should they run into but Mrs. Wisser, a neighbor. "Why, hello," exclaimed Mrs. Wisser, "and there's Ramona. I thought a big girl like you would be going to kindergarten." Ramona had nothing to say. "How old are you, dear?" asked Mrs. Wisser. Ramona still had nothing to say to Mrs. Wisser, but she did hold up 5 fingers for the neighbor to count. "5!" exclaimed Mrs. Wisser. "What's the matter, dear? Has the cat got your tongue?" Ramona stuck out her tongue just enough to show Mrs. Wisser that the cat had not got it. Mrs. Wisser gasped, "Ramona!" Mrs. Quimby was thoroughly exasperated. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wisser. Ramona seems to have forgotten her manners." After this apology, she said angrily, "Ramona Geraldine Quimby, don't you ever let me catch you doing such a thing." "But Mama," protested Ramona as she was dragged toward the parking lot, "she asked me, and I was just showing." There was no use in finishing the sentence because Mrs. Quimby was not listening, and she probably would not have understood if she had listened. Mrs. Quimby and Ramona returned home in time to pass the morning kindergarten, straggling along the sidewalk with their seatwork papers to show their mothers. Ramona got down on the floor of the car so she would not be seen. Later that afternoon, Beezus brought Mary Jane home from school to play. "How did you like kindergarten today, Ramona?" asked Mary Jane in a bright, false tone. It told Ramona all too clearly that she already knew Ramona had not gone to kindergarten. "Why don't you shut up?" asked Ramona. "I'll bet Henry Huggins isn't going to want to marry a girl who hasn't even finished kindergarten," said Mary Jane. "Oh, don't tease her," said Beezus, who might laugh at her sister herself, but was quick to protect her from others. Ramona went outside and rode her two-wheeled, lopsided tricycle up and down the sidewalk for a while before she sadly removed Miss Binny's red ribbon, which she had woven through the spokes of her front wheel. On the second morning, Mrs. Quimby took a dress out of Ramona's closet without a word. Ramona spoke. "I'm not going to school," she said. "Ramona, aren't you ever going to go back to kindergarten?" Mrs. Quimby asked wearily. "Yes," said Ramona. Mrs. Quimby smiled. "Good. Let's make it today." Ramona reached for her play clothes. "No, I'm going to stay away until Miss Binny forgets all about me, and then when I go back, she'll think I'm somebody else." Mrs. Quimby sighed and shook her head. "Ramona, Miss Binny is not going to forget you." "Yes, she will," insisted Ramona. "She will if I stay away long enough." Some older children on the way to school shouted, "Drop out," as they passed the Quimby's house. The day was a long, long one for Ramona. She drew some more seat work for herself, and afterward there was nothing to do but wander around the house, poking her tongue in the hole where her tooth was, while she kept her lips tight shut. And I'm going to stop there. Let's find out tomorrow what happens, and I think tomorrow we're going to finish the book. Okay, guys? I hope you have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.